Resilience is a term we throw around a lot these days, but what does it really mean? In this week's edition of Taiwan Talk, I sit down with Enoch Wu, founder of Taiwan's Forward Alliance, which focuses on civil defense, and he's a member of the Presidential Whole of Society Defense Resilience Committee. He shares his ideas about what resilience means to him and why it's important to society as a whole.
Yeah, I think every parent instinctively knows what it means when it comes to the resilience we want to instill in our children, right? We can't control their environment forever. We can't protect them from adversity. But what we can do is we can give our children the mental fortitude and the confidence and the skills to survive and to thrive. And that's what resilience is about. It's that ability to anticipate and plan for challenges, to respond to adversity when it happens, and to adapt and to recover, right? And that's how we think about resilience in our children. That's also the principles that apply to a society.
Okay, but what should it mean to Taiwan as a country?
Mhm. So, for example, we are, as a country, as a society, we're used to the government and public agencies providing basic services day to day. So, for example, our power, our energy, the phone line we're talking on now, telecommunication, transportation, right? Emergency first responders, sanitation, even, right? So, a lot of these things we call essential services and basic infrastructure. But in a crisis, whether it's a natural or man-made contingency, all that we're used to being provided for, it gets affected one way or another to some degree. And so resilience then is our ability as a society to adapt to these nationwide challenges and get back to normalcy, right? So that companies can continue to do business, parents can continue to go to work, kids can get educated, right? The vulnerable populations are served, and government stays operational. And so that's why resilience has to be a whole of society effort. It's not a government job, a military job, or a civil society job. Everyone has to do their part to make the plans, to anticipate challenges, and to actually take action and respond so that our society as a whole can continue to function.
Okay, now talk us through the components of the exercises that we're going to be seeing. I mean, they're probably not very different from the ones that we see every year, right? Can you talk us through the different components of these exercises? Because we're told about them, we do them, but we don't really think about them in a way that's
Mm.
meaning, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the Hanguang exercises, traditionally, they are a military exercise, and they usually consist of a command post simulation component that happens out of the public eye. And then there's usually a series of drills and demonstrations for public view. And so this year, what's different is that the government is holding what they call an urban resilience exercise concurrently. And that means the Ministry of National Defense and the Ministry of Interior are working together at the same time. And this means that there are concurrent military and civilian efforts to exercise these plans. And the rationale is that resilience and defense go hand in hand. Without resilience, you can't have effective defense because defense relies on a healthy, functioning society for supplies, for services, and for mandate, right? At the highest political level, if you think about it, if a society facing adversity begins to unravel, essential services aren't provided, basic needs aren't met, then there's no way that the government, including the military, will continue to hold a mandate to defend the country, right? And so resilience and defense are two sides of the same coin, and it makes sense that they are exercised together. The truth of the matter is, in every disaster that's happened in Taiwan, the military and civilians already worked together, right? And if we think back to most recently, the Guangfu disaster in Hualien last year, right? And so this is just getting our exercises and our planning to actually catch up with and to match our reality.
Okay, now the big thing, people are being taken aback by this whole internet suspension thing. It's going to kill us. We don't get internet for half an hour. Why was that added in this year?
Well, you're right. You're right. So on August 10th, 7 cities in the middle of Taiwan will get affected. On August 13th, Thursday, another 7 cities in the north will get affected. Let's take a step back and think about why this is important. So communication is one of the most important functions of a society. We rely on communication to share information and to coordinate action and to stay connected, right? Communication is what holds us together. Without it, we can't function as a society. One might even argue without an ability to communicate, we're no longer a society. So it is critical, but it is also very vulnerable because these days, especially, much of how we communicate takes place over data networks, right? Just think, let's all think about how often we make a phone call by typing in the actual phone number, right? The actual digits, right? Versus connecting over some, exactly, right? These days, I think the go-to option is a connection over your application of choice, okay? And so the basic idea of this component this year is to begin to introduce at least the awareness that in resiliency planning, everyone should begin to account for that scenario where our preferred way of communication might be affected, might be degraded in some way, right? That event where we may find ourselves with intermittent 5G service or cellular data, that event where we might have to actually pick up a landline and make a phone call, okay? And so I think this is it's a good start for the business community, for households, civilians, for NGOs, for everyone, right? I think it's an important first step to get folks thinking about it and make resilience no longer a theoretical exercise, but something that has practical implications.
Okay. Now, the exercises that we do every year with the added internet component, are they enough? And if not, what are they missing?
Yeah. So as we just talked about, I think it's a very important first step in introducing these practical constraints and considerations. If you want to exercise a contingency in a way that is constructive, right, then it can't be business as usual, right? And I've seen a lot of discussions about how this 30 minutes that's going into effect this year in limited locations, how that could be better, right? People have talked about, well, the government should be impacted as well, right? Not just people on the street relying on cellular data or 5G, right? I've heard people talk about it should not be restricted to certain regions. It should be nationwide. Some have even talked about it should be closer to a simulated blackout across the board and not just in 5G. Right? I think these are all helpful conversations to be having because we were not having this conversation a year ago today, right? So I think that the government has started the conversation, but I think as a next step, every community within our whole of society needs to take the initiative to now think about what would I do in a scenario where communication is affected, where our preferred way of connecting is no longer available. And that takes leadership, not by the president, not by some minister, but by each one of us that belongs in our own organization. The government can only do so much. And that, again, goes back to the whole principle and spirit of resilience. It's everyone doing their part, sharing responsibility. So government has taken a good step, good initiative, but I think we should all take advantage of that 30 minutes come August 10th and August 13th and work with our colleagues and role play and game out some of these situations. Well, what if we need how would we stay in business? How would we continue with our sales call, for example? How would we ensure our kids are able to even remotely attend class, in these scenarios? I think that's what we can do more.
Okay, when we're talking about defense, the goal from everyone that I've spoken to has been not today, right? The goal is not today. We should be able to get to a point where China looks out the window, looks at us and says, not today. What is the objective for these exercises?
Okay. I think this goes back to the linkage between defense and resilience. First, we should be clear that resilience is not defense. Resilience cannot defend the homeland. Resilience cannot dissuade an enemy from attacking. Resilience on its own is not a deterrence, okay? Resilience is only our collective ability to withstand adversity, to adapt, to survive, and to recover, right? That's it, right? In the crudest term, resilience is your ability to take a punch. And anyone that's experienced your schoolyard dynamic knows that an ability to take the punch would not deter that punch from coming, right? So that's why defense is important, right? Because assuming as a society we can withstand pressure, we can recover from adversity. Defense is our actual ability to repel and to defeat and to hopefully, with proper planning, to deter an attack, so that we don't end up in the situation in the first place, right? We want to maintain peace. We want to maintain our peace and security and our prosperity. And so that's why the thinking behind defense, as you say, is deterrence means making your opponent decide today is not the day to pick a fight. Okay.
Not today, right?
Not today. But resilience is foundational to that, because resilience tells the other side we are prepared, we are ready, and we can withstand and we can endure, right? So it's that ability to endure and survive, coupled with military capability, together has the best chance, the only chance of deterring an attack in the first place. So it's a very long way of saying resilience underpins that military strategy. And without resilience, that not today is only a phrase. Yeah.
Understood.
Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Okay. Do you think the message that we talked about in terms of resilience is getting through to the public, and what would it take to bring that message home? That actually speaks as well to the government's ability to message, right?
So the government has taken an important step, which is it started the conversation. And I think what's important now is for all of us to join that conversation, and make this a group effort. Taiwan's a democracy. We're all here because we love, enjoy, embrace, and value Taiwan for what it is. And a big part of Taiwan's spirit and Taiwan's value and Taiwan's identity is the vibrancy of our civic culture. And so we all know government cannot solve every problem, and government should not solve every problem, because again, in a democracy, there's collective ownership. And that's it. That's a roundabout way of saying now all of us, I think, should jump in and really leverage this event, this very, very limited 30-minute window, to have that same conversation in our surroundings with our communities. So if all of us can take leadership at every level, right, in a company, whether you are the general manager or part of your employee welfare committee or just part of your team, have that conversation with your colleagues about this issue. Hey, how much are we relying on a certain data network, a certain data link, a certain cloud access, a certain application? And if that were to go away, what's our fallback? And what's our fallback to that fallback? What is our contingency plan? How do we stay in business? Okay. If you're a parent, take this opportunity to have that conversation with your family. Maybe it's with your retired parents. Maybe it's with your kids. Hey, if you can't reach mom and dad on your watch, well, this is where we're going to meet, right? This is our first meeting point if you can't get in touch with us. Okay. If you can't come home, if you get lost, if you get disconnected, this is where we go next, and then next. Hey, can you remember mom and dad's cell phone number? Do you still remember that off the top of your head? Do you know grandma's number, right? Have that conversation. And if you're an NGO serving people in need, you have to know that your community, the communities that you serve day in, day out, they're going to need even more assistance from you in a crisis. And so it's even more important for you as a social service organization, as a nonprofit, to think through these scenarios and have a plan for how to stay in operation. Forward Alliance has a free app called I Can Help, and anyone can download this app. On this app, there is a map where we've collected and collated emergency services and all relevant data That is helpful in our emergency planning. For example, where the local firehouse is, where the local police precinct is, and importantly, the government mandated shelters. In the past, this data, it's available on various ministry websites, but they've been static. And as we've talked about in various settings, a lot of air raid shelters are not accessible because they might be in a private building, they might be in a mall, it might be restricted to the public, close to the public. As you know, many of these shelters are not accessible, right? And so what we've done with our app is, well, what if all of us can just take a minute or two on our way to work and click through and check out the shelters in our neighborhood and report back the level of accessibility at each one of these locations, right? Does it have handicap accessibility? Does it have a limited opening hours? And let's turn this static data set into a more dynamic and current set of information that is useful to our friends and neighbors in our broader community. The reason we put this tool together is because we recognize that it has to be a group effort. We have to find a way to get everyone interested and involved. That's just what we are doing as one NGO, and I think everyone can do something similar in their respective communities and in their own teams. Take ownership as a citizen. Your question is how do we drive this message home? And I think at the end of the day, we will only care as a society if every one of us takes resilience seriously.
You were listening to Enoch Wu, founder of Taiwan's Forward Alliance and a member of the Presidential Whole of Society Defense Resilience Committee. I'm Hope Go. Thank you for tuning in.